when Dad screamed into the phone, "Where the hell are you? Marissa, do you have any idea what you just did?" The old version of me would have flinched. My hands would have shaken. My breath would have tightened. And I would have apologized even when I didn't understand what I'd done wrong. But that night, standing alone on the balcony of my apartment with the cold January air brushing against my face, I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity, so I answered him calmly, almost softly. "Can you guess where I am? Did the family enjoy my gift?" There was a pause on the line, a stunned, confused silence I had never heard from him before. Then, in the background, I heard voices rising in the dining room, chairs scraping, someone shouting for everyone to wait, my mother's strained voice trying to keep control. And then it happened. The moment I had known would slice the entire room open, my sister's scream cut through the phone. High and raw. Oh my God. What is this? I could picture it perfectly, the long dining table, the polished silverware, the forced smiles of relatives pretending we were a close family. And in the center of all of it, on the seat they reserved for me, sat the white box I left behind. A box that would finally tell the truth louder than I ever could. I leaned against the railing, listening to the chaos echoing through the phone. For once, their shock didn't terrify me. It didn't weaken me. It didn't make me shrink into the small, silent version of myself they had shaped over the years. Instead, I felt something steady rise in my chest. Something warm and unfamiliar strength. I thought that was the end. I didn't know that 10 years later, they would come back to sue me for the life I built without them. Before I go on, I want to acknowledge something from my heart. Sharing the beginning of this story is never easy. And the fact that you're here with me truly means something. If these early moments remind you of anything you've lived through, I'm grateful for your company as I continue. And if you ever feel like adding your own thoughts or reflections, know that I read every message with real appreciation. I grew up in a family where appearances mattered more than people. The Langfords were known in our town for their charity drives, their spotless home, and the way my parents could charm a room with practiced smiles. But behind closed doors, things were different. My mother's disappointment had a way of filling an entire space. Even when she didn't speak, my father's temper lit up the house like lightning fast. Unpredictable. Unforgettable. And then there was my sister, Allison, the golden child, the girl who excelled effortlessly at everything, the daughter they adored. Me, I was the quiet one, the one who was too sensitive, the one they joked about at family gatherings, the one they dismissed, corrected, ignored. I spent years learning how to hide the hurt, how to laugh when I was humiliated, how to accept being the family punchline. Every holiday, every birthday, every dinner seemed to come with a new reminder that I didn't belong in the version of the family they presented to the world. So, when I overheard them planning to humiliate me at the New Year's celebration again, it didn't shock me. It just confirmed what I already knew. Their cruelty didn't fade with time. It simply grew more polished. And that night, for the first time in my life, I didn't let it happen. Growing up in the Langford household meant learning to read danger in the smallest details, the way my mother's fingers tapped against the counter, the way my father inhaled sharply before speaking, the tilt of Allison's head when she was about to turn a joke into a weapon. People on the outside thought our family was charming, respectable, almost enviable. Inside, everything felt like walking across ice, so thin you could hear it crack beneath every step. My mother believed perfection wasn't just a goal but a moral duty. She corrected everything I did, from how I held a fork to the way I said my own name. When guests came over, she touched my shoulder lightly and whispered, "Smile more, but not too much. You don't want to look desperate." If I spoke too softly, she sighed. If I spoke too loudly, she stiffened. If I disagreed with anyone, she apologized for me before I even finished my sentence. My father, on the other hand, measured worth by achievement. Not mine, Allison's. Her grades, her sports trophies, her leadership roles, her popularity. He displayed her accomplishments on every wall of the house. Mine were tucked into drawers or accidentally misplaced. When I asked why he never celebrated me the way he celebrated her, he said, "Maybe work harder and give us something worth celebrating." Allison embraced her role like a queen, wearing a crown made of praise. She learned early how to twist a joke just enough to hurt me but not enough to get in trouble. When I flinched, she laughed harder. When I fell quiet, she smirked like she had won something invisible. Every holiday, every birthday, every gathering became another performance where she shone and I disappeared right on cue. By the time I was a teenager, I had learned to keep my head down. I cooked, cleaned, helped plan events, stayed out of trouble. None of it mattered. My mother still compared me to Allison. My father still dismissed anything I achieved. And Allison still treated me like a prop in her spotlight. But the worst moments were always behind the scenes, the jokes they didn't think I heard. The whispers they thought were harmless. The time Allison told her friends, "Marissa's emotions are like a faucet, you bump it, and she leaks." Or when my mother snorted during a family photo session and said, "Honestly, she ruins every picture with that face." Even the photographer froze. One Thanksgiving, Allison purposely spilled cranberry sauce on my dress and said loudly, "It's okay." No one was looking at her anyway. Everyone laughed. Except me. I excused myself to the bathroom and cleaned the stain while staring into the mirror, wondering how a family could make you feel so small without ever touching you. That dinner was the first time I asked myself a question that would follow me for years. If love is real, why doesn't it reach me? Years later, when I overheard them planning my humiliation at the New Year's celebration, that same question echoed inside me. I stood in the kitchen doorway, listening to their voices float down the hall, my mother laughing, my father suggesting jokes, Allison insisting she wanted to deliver the punchline. They didn't know I was standing there. They didn't know I heard every word. They didn't know something inside me finally fractured. But the fracture wasn't a break. It was the beginning of a boundary. And boundaries, once drawn, become powerful things. The family's New Year's celebration was always an event designed for performance rather than togetherness. My parents used it as their stage. The dining room becoming a polished theater where they flaunted hospitality and family unity to friends and distant relatives. For years, I played my assigned role, the quiet daughter, the polite helper, the one who stayed out of the way so the evening could sparkle. But this year was different. I knew exactly what they were. 2 nights before the party, I had walked into the kitchen carrying empty glasses. I froze when I heard my mother giggling with my father and Allison. They were choosing who would deliver the joke meant to humiliate me, something about my continued lack of direction, or Marissa's latest attempt at existing. They debated punchlines like they were choosing decorations. My mother even said, "It'll be harmless fun. She's used to it." My father chuckled. Allison promised she could make the room roar. They plotted my humiliation as casually as choosing hors-d'oeuvre. I backed away before they saw me, my heart pounding, not because I was surprised they'd done it for years, but because something inside me felt different. I wasn't hurt this time. I was angry. And beneath the anger, something sharp took shape. not revenge, not truth, the day of the celebration. I walked into the house only long enough to place the white box on my assigned seat, the seat positioned in the center of the table, where their jokes would land the hardest. No one noticed me slip in. They were too busy arranging wine glasses and, the box was simple, white with a gold ribbon. No note. No name. It didn't need one. Everything inside spoke for itself. Then I left. That evening, as guests arrived, I parked my car on a quiet street a few blocks away. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence, letting the cold air seep into the windows. I imagined them scanning the room. Wondering where I was, I imagined Allison smirking, saying I was probably hiding in embarrassment already. I imagined my mother crafting an excuse, something about me running late as usual. Then I pictured the moment the box would be opened. I didn't have to wait long. My phone buzzed with the first call from my father. I didn't answer. The second was from my mother. Then Allison. Then my aunt. I let every call ring out. My heart thudded. Not in fear, but in anticipation. The fifth call was my father again. I answered. "Where the hell are you?" he shouted. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stepped out of my car, the winter air burning my cheeks. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I simply asked, "Can you guess where I am? Did the family enjoy my gift?" There was a pause. The kind of pause that tells you someone has just realized the world is not as firmly under their control as they believed. Then came the noise, faint at first. Then unmistakable. Shouting. Confusion. A chair scraping. Someone demanding to know who had touched the box. And then, piercing the chaos, Allison's scream. High. Panicked. Shocked. "Oh my God. What is this?" Her voice cracked on the last word. And I felt something inside me finally settle. Inside that box were copies of every memory they tried to bury. Photos they edited me out of. Messages where they mocked me. Audio recordings of their jokes. Notes of every insult disguised as humor. Evidence of a lifetime spent being their shadow. Their scapegoat. Their target. All of it laid bare in front of the very audience they cared about most. For the first time in my life, the room was seeing me, not the version they created. The truth. In the days after the New Year's dinner, the Langford image began to crack faster than I ever imagined. Relatives who once bragged about my parents suddenly kept their distance. Friends who used to gush about our perfect family now sounded cautious, careful, almost curious. The box had done exactly what I needed it to do. It told the truth in a way no argument, no plea, and no emotional breakdown ever had. My parents reacted the only way they knew how, with denial wrapped in anger. They left voicemails accusing me of betrayal, twisting my choice into an attack on everything they believed they had built. They sent long texts, insisting I had misunderstood them, that I had humiliated them for no reason. My mother's messages were full of dramatic phrases she had never used when I actually lived under her roof. "You blindsided us. Marissa, you embarrassed our entire family. Do you have any idea how cruel that was?" My father skipped past emotion and went straight to control. "This isn't over. You owe us a conversation. You owe us an apology." I owed them nothing, so I blocked their numbers. Not out of spite. Not as some dramatic move, but out of self-preservation. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was peaceful, with their voices finally shut out. I poured myself into my work. At the design firm, my manager, Claire, noticed almost immediately. She didn't pry. She just watched me closely for a few days before saying something that stuck with me. Sometimes you have to pull out the weeds before you can see what you've been trying to grow. Her words echoed in my head long after she walked away. Work stopped being only a paycheck and became a lifeline. I volunteered for complex projects, picked up extra responsibilities, and let myself care about the outcome of every event I touched. Late at night, I studied color theory, lighting, and event layouts at my kitchen table, with a mug of tea by my elbow. My little apartment, once just a place to sleep, slowly turned into a space that felt like mine in every detail. A soft rug, secondhand chairs, warm lamps, photos I chose, of people who actually cared about me. I started making friends too. Real ones. People from work who didn't see me as a joke or a shadow, who didn't look for ways to cut me down mid-sentence. Renee, one of my coworkers, invited me to her place for a movie night with a few friends. My first instinct was to say no, to retreat, to stay where it was safe and familiar. But something inside me nudged me forward. And I said yes, that night, sitting on her couch under a shared blanket, listening to easy laughter and casual conversation. I felt something I wasn't sure I'd ever really felt before: belonging. No one was watching me for weakness. No one was waiting for me to mess up. No one was turning me into a punchline. I was just there. Present. Accepted. Still. The quiet from my parents made me uneasy. Not because I missed them, but because I understood them too well. People like them didn't accept being exposed. They didn't learn from being confronted. They regrouped. They schemed. Over time, I started hearing little updates from the edges. A cousin mentioned my parents were trying to repair their image. A neighbor told me my mother had cried in front of her gardening club, talking about how ungrateful I was. Allison blocked me on social media for a week, then unblocked me, likely to keep watching. Then, one afternoon at the office, a courier stepped into the lobby holding a stack of thick envelopes with my name printed neatly on each one. The paper was heavy, the seals embossed in dark ink. My stomach tightened before I even touched them. When I opened the first envelope and saw the words at the top of the page, the air around me seemed to thin. My parents hadn't moved on. They had escalated. Not with a conversation, not with remorse. With lawyers. The moment I opened the envelope and saw the words, "Notice of intent to pursue legal action," my entire body went still. Not afraid. Not panicked. Just still. Like my mind was giving me a few seconds to understand that the people who raised me, the people who mocked me, the people who threw away every chance to treat me like family, were now trying to take something from me they never helped build. I sat in the office break room with the documents spread out in front of me, the hum of the vending machine filling the silence as I read line after line of accusations that felt completely detached from reality. My parents claimed emotional contributions, financial investment, and familial support that supposedly justified their right to a portion of my income. They insisted that my career existed because of them, that their structure and guidance had shaped me into the woman I had become, the woman they had mocked, humiliated, and pushed out of their lives. They even claimed I had caused irreparable emotional damage to the family's reputation by exposing private matters at the New Year's dinner. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so predictable. My hands didn't shake. My throat didn't tighten. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, like something inside had already prepared for this moment long before I knew it was coming. I took a slow breath, gathered the papers into a neat stack, and called the one person I trusted with something like this, my lawyer. Danielle Rhodes. Danielle was sharp, composed, and frighteningly efficient. When I arrived at her office that afternoon, she already had her reading glasses on and a legal pad in front of her. She read through every allegation with a level of focus I'd never seen. When she finally set the papers down, her jaw tightened. "Marissa," she said, "this is a textbook example of a frivolous family lawsuit. They have no legal foundation. None. But they're attempting to intimidate you into settling privately." I knew she was right. My parents had always relied on fear more than fairness. They believed if they pushed hard enough, I would fold like I used to. What they didn't understand was that the girl who used to shrink under their voices didn't exist anymore. Danielle outlined our plan. She would file a counter motion to dismiss. She would request financial penalties for wasted court resources. And, most importantly, she would request that the court acknowledge a documented history of emotional mistreatment. When she said that last part, I felt something inside me loosen, not relief, but recognition. Someone finally saw what I had survived. The following weeks were filled with meetings, signed affidavits, and evidence collections. Danielle helped me gather photos, texts, and witness statements from people who had known me during the years I was essentially on my own. Coworkers, former teachers, neighbors, people my family never realized paid attention. Meanwhile, my parents doubled down. They posted vague, self-pitying messages on social media. They visited relatives, telling dramatic stories about how I had turned on them. Allison even sent me a voice message accusing me of destroying the family name. I didn't reply. Silence was my boundary, and I held it firmly. Yet beneath all the chaos, something important happened. I didn't crumble. I didn't spiral. I didn't fall into old patterns of guilt. Instead, every new document, every legal step forward, every meeting with Danielle made me feel something steady building inside me. Something that looked a lot like self-respect. My parents wanted to scare me, but all they did was prove exactly why I walked away. The weeks leading up to the court date unfolded in a way that felt strangely steady, almost controlled. As if my life had finally shifted onto a track where I wasn't constantly bracing for the next emotional blow. My parents had made their move. Their intentions were loud and clear. But for once, I wasn't reacting from fear. I was preparing from strength. Danielle guided me through every step with a calm precision that made the process feel almost manageable. We gathered proof of my independence going back years. Old employment records, college applications, emails from professors, rental agreements, tax returns. It was all there. A paper trail documenting a life I had built without a single ounce of support from the people now claiming credit for it. Each document felt like a mirror held up to the truth. Every page reminded me how hard I'd worked, how far I'd come, and how deeply I had earned the life I was living. But the most powerful pieces of evidence weren't financial. They were emotional. Screenshots of texts from my mother belittling me. Audio recordings of my parents making jokes at my expense. Voicemails from Allison, mocking me in moments she thought were private. And the recordings from the New Year's planning those cold, casual conversations where my family crafted my humiliation as if it were an appetizer became the foundation of our case. Danielle listened to those recordings with her jaw set, her pen tapping against the desk. After the last one ended, she looked at me and said quietly, "Anyone who hears this will understand exactly who they are, and exactly who you had to become." Meanwhile, my own life continued moving forward in ways I hadn't expected. My work expanded rapidly. Claire gave me full creative control over 2 major corporate events, and both clients requested to work with me again for future projects. My confidence grew with each successful meeting. Each design presentation, each moment someone valued my ideas without tearing me down. At home, I made small changes that felt like acts of healing. I bought a new comforter in a soft sage color. I replaced the dim bulbs in my apartment with warm-toned lights. I hung framed prints I'd saved for months, waiting for the right moment to claim my space fully. I even picked up a small rescue cat from a local shelter, a gentle gray tabby I named Willow, who took exactly 1 day to curl up in my lap as if she'd been waiting for me. For the first time in my life, my home felt like something I had chosen, not something I'd been forced into. And, more importantly, it felt safe. Still, the silence from my parents grew louder, not because I missed them, but because I recognized what that silence meant. Whenever they stopped shouting, it meant they were planning, strategizing, trying to regain the control they felt slipping through their fingers. The confirmation arrived in the form of a certified letter sent to Danielle's office. Inside was a long, exhausting rebuttal drafted by my parents' attorney filled with defensive statements, exaggerated claims, and thinly veiled attempts to paint themselves as victims. Danielle skimmed the letter, sighed, and set it aside. "They're scrambling," she said. "People don't write this much when they have confidence in their case." She was right. They were unraveling, and I wasn't part of the thread anymore. Late one evening, after reviewing the final set of documents for the hearing, I stood by my apartment window, looking out at the city lights scattered across the dark. For years, those lights had reminded me of everything I didn't have: security, belonging, direction. Now they reminded me of everything I had built, not in spite of my family, because I walked away from them. The trial was approaching, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of facing them. I was ready. The morning of the hearing arrived with a cold stillness that felt almost symbolic. I woke before the alarm, dressed slowly, tied my hair back with steady hands, and looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. Not to rehearse confidence, not to convince myself I was ready, but to acknowledge the woman standing there. The woman I had become without them, the woman they never expected me to be. Danielle met me at the courthouse steps, her expression calm and certain. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded, and together we walked inside. The hallways were quiet except for the faint clicks of shoes on polished floors. For a moment, I felt the ghost of an old fear, the kind that used to coil in my stomach whenever my parents were near, but it faded just as quickly. I wasn't the same girl they once controlled. My parents sat on the opposite side of the courtroom. My mother wore an expression she likely practiced in the mirror wounded. Delicate, subtly accusing. My father sat stiffly beside her, jaw tight, eyes darting toward me with a mix of anger and uncertainty. Allison sat behind them, arms crossed, her confidence thinner than I'd ever seen. When the judge began the session, my parents' attorney launched into a speech about family unity, sacrifice, and the emotional damage they claimed I had caused by exposing private matters. He described them as patient, supportive parents who guided me into adulthood. I almost laughed. But Danielle gently tapped my wrist, a reminder to stay composed. Then it was Danielle's turn. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She simply presented the truth with precision. She handed the judge copies of employment records showing I'd been financially independent since 17. She presented the rental agreements, tax returns, and academic records that proved my parents hadn't contributed a cent. Then came the emotional evidence, the texts, the dismissive messages, the recordings of the New Year's planning. My mother closed her eyes as her own voice echoed through the courtroom speakers. calling me oversensitive and mocking my tears as if they were entertainment. My father shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening each time. He heard himself laugh at my expense. When Allison's voice played joking about how easy it is to embarrass Marissa, she visibly flinched. The judge held up her hand, signaling for Danielle to pause. She turned slowly toward my parents. "Is this your voice?" she asked. Neither of them answered right away. My mother finally whispered, We were joking." The judge's voice sharpened. Jokes become cruelty when the target is not laughing. My parents' attorney tried to recover, but the momentum had shifted. Danielle calmly presented the welfare report from the night I was kicked out, a piece of evidence my parents clearly didn't expect anyone to ever see again. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence. After reviewing every document, the judge leaned back, folded her hands, and spoke with a stern clarity that filled the room. The court finds no legal basis for the plaintiff's claim. Moreover, the evidence demonstrates a long-standing pattern of emotional mistreatment toward the defendant. This case is dismissed in full. Further attempts to pursue financial compensation may result in penalties and legal restrictions. My mother gasped. My father's face fell. Allison's eyes went wide with disbelief. But I didn't look at them. Not when I stood. Not when I gathered my papers. Not when I walked out of the courtroom into the crisp winter air. Outside, I inhaled deeply. The cold didn't sting, it felt clean. Almost new. I walked down the steps with Danielle beside me, the weight of years lifting with each step. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking away from my family. I was walking toward myself. Before I end this story, I want to say something sincerely. Thank you for being here with me through every part of this journey. Knowing someone is listening even to the hardest chapters means more than I can express. If you'd like to stay with me for more stories, your support through a like or a subscribe is something I truly appreciate. And if any part of this touched your own experience, I hope you'll share it. I read every message with genuine gratitude.